actually tried to get the confidential and proprietary materials my team and I used for any and all stories about her. Because Blake Lively was unable to fathom that yours truly had developed a genuine revulsion toward her on my own, she posited that I must have been ensnared in Baldoni's alleged ongoing smear campaign against her, that his attorney...
Listen carefully to what I'm about to say, because this is the moment Blake Lively's entire public strategy cracked open in front of the whole world. What you are about to hear is a full breakdown of how one Instagram post turned into the clearest credibility crisis of her career.
It gets narrowed, but, it's not cheap to do that. And then also, because I'm a human and I need to sleep at some points, I would probably also want to get a line saver for some of those days, which is also not cheap. So I did end up doing a fundraiser. I've never fundraised like this before. I don't love it. I like using YouTube because I get to talk about what I want to talk about. And
here is what I want you to understand. Blake Lively is not in a small situation. She is in the middle of a brutal legal and PR war with Justin Baldoni, and every move she makes is being read under a microscope. And then, out of nowhere, she reposts content about Justin Bieber, about his public scrutiny, about his healing, about how the public shows up with empathy only after the damage is done. On the surface, it looked thoughtful, but critics say that is exactly the problem. Because when you are drowning in your own storm, and you suddenly grab the emotional language of another bruised celebrity, people do not call that compassion. People call that strategy. And that is exactly why the backlash hits so hard. For many, this was a calculated borrowing of someone else's pain to soften the shape of her own.
Entertainer, because everyone feels a right to them for being in the public eye. Oh, back to Justin, right? Because this is about him, yeah, right? She says, seeing Little Bieber meet that with healing was stunning. First of all, I don't think you were there, but you saw the clips like the rest of us. Does anyone get the idea that, she's obviously making this about herself? Right? Do you see?
Now let me tell you something important. Justin Bieber's story is not a manufactured scandal. It is a documented arc of a child star consumed by the public from the age of 13, broken down in real time through years of invasive coverage and visible breakdowns. That is not a talking point. That is real suffering. Blake Lively's situation, on the other hand, is a celebrity legal battlefield, loaded with filings, interviews, and carefully staged statements. To many observers, placing these two stories on the same emotional shelf is not insight. It is manipulation. Critics say she reached for a safer victim narrative because her own narrative was collapsing, and that is the first warning sign that her team is no longer crisis managing. They are crisis performing.
This is what's going on. The point is she's aligning herself with a victim that's currently in the headlines and a trending topic. I'm guessing her team will likely run headlines on this and PR around this of Blake Lively is, talking about the trauma Justin Bieber went through. She's piggybacking on him being in the headlines and him having been a victim to the industry, by the way, including P. Diddy.
Let me be very clear with you about what happened next. Ryan Reynolds walked in with a public defense, saying people cannot tell the difference between real life and digital life, saying he has never been prouder of his wife. On paper, that is a loving husband. In practice, critics say that is damage control dressed up as devotion. Blake builds the emotional frame. Ryan reinforces the moral shield. The machine moves in lockstep. And when audiences feel that emotion is being sold to them rather than shared with them, they push back harder. For many viewers, Ryan's statement did not rescue the moment. It confirmed the suspicion. This was message discipline. And message discipline in the middle of a credibility crisis is the fastest way to lose the room.
You really see kind of the illusion behind so much of this stuff, digital life versus real life. I've never in my life been more proud of my wife.
Ryan earnestly adds, people have no idea what's really going on, and I've just never in my life been more proud of someone with that level of integrity that brings that with them and carries that with.
Here is what I want you to think about. Public memory is short, but internet memory is brutal. Old Blake Lively interviews are being pulled out of the archive. Clips where she looks cold. Clips where she looks dismissive. Clips where she treats journalists like an inconvenience. And suddenly, the current controversy is not sitting in isolation. It is sitting inside a pattern. Critics say the warm, relatable celebrity image was never the full picture. They say the real pattern is image-conscious, tone-deaf, and selectively empathetic. And once a pattern forms in public perception, every new post stops being read as a moment. It starts being read as evidence.
First of all, congrats on your little bump.
Congrats on your little bump.
What about my bump?
You've got two nice ones.
And they are kind of bumps, aren't they?
No, not bumps. The lovely lady lumps.
Mark my words when I say this. The Bieber repost did not blow up because people hate Blake Lively. It blew up because people finally saw the mechanics. Pain, public cruelty, healing, empathy. Every emotional note in that post was perfectly chosen, too perfectly chosen. For many, it read like calibration, not compassion. Like someone reached into another person's trauma, pulled out the exact frequency they needed, and layered it over their own mess without ever saying their own name. The message that landed was simple. Look what the public does to people like me. Critics say that is not empathy, that is emotional redirection, and audiences today are too fluent in PR to miss it.
A major win for Justin Baldoni, just in time for their trial. His and Blake Lively's coming up in May. The judge threw out her sexual harassment claims against him. He kept her retaliation claim and another claim, but the main claim that he sexually harassed her is out because she was basing it on an agreement that he never actually signed and no one from...
Now hear me out on this one, because the timing is the real killer. This post did not land in a neutral week. It landed right after the court narrowed her legal ground. Reports indicate the judge dismissed 10 out of 13 of her claims. 10 out of 13. Only a handful of retaliation-related issues are moving toward trial. That is a structural hit to the moral high ground she was building in public. And when your legal position shrinks, and your next move is an Instagram philosophy drop about public cruelty and healing, critics say that is not reflection, that is redirection. The courtroom said no. The caption said, "Look over here instead," and the audience noticed.
Lively's manner of pay was consistent with her status as an independent contractor. For example, the court pointed to the fact that Lively was paid by the project rather than hourly, and also through her own loan-out company, Blake L. Inc. The court also pointed to the fact that she owned a huge piece of the movie, according to her own words. And the court also said that she reserved and exercised a significant amount of control over production. As the court pointed out, she played a part in hiring and firing assistants, negotiated for the relocation of filming to be closer to her home, rewrote the script, conducted meetings with all department heads in the studio, oversaw...
Let me put it to you straight. When you fight a case in court and a war in public at the same time, the two lanes start cannibalizing each other. Public sentiment is not evidence. Emotional framing is not testimony. And when audiences feel they are being fed emotional shorthand instead of legal clarity, trust collapses fast. Critics say that is exactly where Blake is right now, trapped in a loop where every attempt to restore her image deepens the suspicion that the image was always the point. That is not a communication problem, that is a credibility crisis.
Justin's team is wisely trying to get her to commit. Here's her complaints. And then later in court, when she brings up some new ones, they can say, Your Honor, she didn't bring that up. And Blake's trying to keep her options open so she can constantly bring in a million new things all the time. That's not how court works. You gotta sue based on what you heard, not on stuff that just keeps coming to you throughout. It's supposed to be so effective and so bad, right, that you remember these things. And she's trying to, protect herself by not revealing too much. But it's very interesting because I'll
tell you exactly what's happening here. Commentators are openly saying she is piggybacking on Bieber's pain, that she borrowed a safer victim story to rehabilitate a damaged one. That turning Justin Bieber into a supporting character in her own reputation project is, in itself, an ugly move. And that last point is the one cutting deepest, because it reframes the entire conversation. This is no longer about whether Blake was wronged. This is about whether Blake uses other people's wounds as decoration for her own narrative. How do you come back from an accusation like that without making it worse?
Britney is smoke and mirrors. That's what Blake is. Blake is smoke and mirrors. And so there's no real anchor. There's no real foundation there. So if she loses the veneer, if she loses the illusion of success, which she has, there's nothing else left. She's literally the emperor with no clothes on now. She has been exposed. She can't fall back onto...
Here is the bigger picture. When a celebrity's appeal is built almost entirely on image, likability, and curated charm, credibility is the first wall that collapses under pressure. And once it collapses, audiences reopen everything. The acting, the interviews, the press tours, the industry whispers, the off-screen behavior. Suddenly, every old moment is reread through a harsher lens. This is not a single-post problem anymore. This is exposure. Critics say Blake is no longer fighting Justin Baldoni in public opinion. She is fighting her own accumulated reputation, and that is a much harder war to win.
Move to block talk about her net worth in court.
Justin wants to discuss Blake's finances at trial because it's a question of damages. Even if Lively proves that Baldoni harmed her, she needs to prove how much she was harmed monetarily.
Blake is claiming that Justin's so-called smear campaign cost her $161 million in potential brand damages. So how much is at stake?
We completely immerse ourselves in our work.
Blake's worth an estimated $30 million, which includes her beverage line, hair care products, endorsements.
Let me share something with you as we close this out. The central point is not that Blake Lively mentioned Justin Bieber. The central point is that the public now reads every move as part of one continuous pattern, sees the narrative, adopt the moral tone, build the sympathy frame, treat every backlash as proof of persecution. The Baldoni lawsuit cracked the image. Ryan's defense made the crack louder. The old clips added context. The court rulings punctured the halo. And the Bieber repost exposed the machinery underneath. This was not a post. This was a reveal. A reveal that in the middle of a legal and PR war, Blake Lively still looks less interested in clearing the air and more interested in controlling the emotional frame. And every polished caption from here on will carry the same question underneath it. Is this empathy, or is this just another chapter in reputation management? So tell me in the comments, do you think Blake crossed a line by pulling Justin Bieber into her own storm? Is Ryan Reynolds helping her image or quietly sinking it? Can any celebrity survive a credibility crisis this deep without rebuilding from zero? If this breakdown hit the way it was meant to, hit that like button, subscribe for more no sugarcoating breakdowns, and drop your take in the comments.